As they talk about in the documentary, they tried to use Bob and Jillian as psycho-pseudotherapists. Shame and humiliation, I believe, were probably the two biggest things that stood out for me as a motivation tool. As someone who struggles with their weight, we already feel that every single day from the world, from advertising. I don't think that helped at all.
I think that it was a sign of the times. The tough love was sort of a sign of the times, that was sort of how trainers were. When The Biggest Loser came out, I was still struggling with my own eating issues. 2005, I was 24, 25. Those are like my rock bottom years. So I was kind of going to personal trainers. You know, there was this masochistic element to watching The Biggest Loser for me. Hello and welcome to another new episode of Emotional Eating Unwrapped. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, and I am excited today. We are doing a long-awaited episode on a review of The Biggest Loser documentary, and I have Brittny here with me today. She's my amazing podcast producer. I have to say, this was her idea. She was like all about me giving her my opinion on The Biggest Loser, and you know, I was hesitant because, you know, my opinion, I'm not sure, but Brittny convinced me, and I'm so happy that we're doing this. And if you are new to me, my name is Alana Kessler. I am a registered dietitian. I have been in this health, wellness, mindfulness space for 20 plus years, and I work clinically. I've done all the things, but my passion is really helping women and men, actually, all people, you know, really find love with their body, lose weight, reconnect with themselves, overcome any kind of emotional or addictive behaviors with food, and just really live your best life. So if you are here and you are new, welcome. And we're just going to get right into it today. So Brittny, what are we talking about?
Alana, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited for this episode. So thank you for, agreeing to do it. And also I am so impressed by the work that you've done, like how long you've been in this industry, how much knowledge that you have in this field. And I think that is just like, so congratulations, first of all. That's a huge accomplishment.
Thank you.
I'm excited to get your take on The Biggest Loser. This is a really, really interesting topic for me because I didn't watch The Biggest Loser when it first came out. This is like early 2000s kind of reality TV. And I wasn't watching it much then. But as soon as the drop came for the Fit for TV, so that is the official title, it's Fit for TV on Netflix. And I just thought I had to watch it. I personally have struggled with my weight on and off for many years. So I never watched a show, but I was really interested in what would convince someone to go on a show like this and get up in front of millions of people and try to lose weight. So I'm interested to hear like what your initial, I know we talked a little bit before and you said you watched it when it was live. What were some of your initial thoughts on the show?
Yeah, I did. I watched it when it was live. I was probably in my mid to late 20s, I think, when it came out. It was like the 2006 or so, around that time. So a couple years out of college, doing my master's and stuff. And, the weird thing is that it wasn't weird. Like right now, people are like, it's just like, wow, I can't believe people did this. It's so crazy. But back then I felt like it was a revelation. And if you watch the documentary, I've watched the documentary too, it is really what they say in the beginning where people were almost felt like it was like an opening for them to lose weight. And it was like, it was a peek into maybe something that they couldn't get themselves, which was like personal training and hard regimen. And it was almost like this aspirational thing because it was before social media.
Yeah.
So it was really different. And I think it gave people motivation to lose weight at the time or to feel inspired. Like it was more of an inspiration thing back then than it was like, oh my God, this is actually potentially could be unhealthy.
When it broke, like in the third episode, they talk about the New York Times finally wrote an article about how they believed, there were some alleged unhealthy practices going on. I don't think many people saw that coming. Like what you're saying, it was more of an inspiration for people pre-social media, pre-influencer accounts, pre-like transformation channels for people to see people really making real change in their life.
For sure. And there was also a certain suspension of critical thinking, I think, with the show, because now our brains are wired to be so much more skeptical and to be like, what's real, what's fake? What are you showing on social media or on a screen? That's, everyone's like now smart enough to be like, oh, this is real, this is fake. Back then, if it was on a show, it was real. So you could suspend your critical thinking. You didn't. Like, you just believed it, right? They had two trainers who were like super professional, pause for what happened later, but like super professional. And, it was on TV. So therefore, it had immediate authority and validation. You didn't think about what was happening when the cameras are off. You just didn't think that way. Whereas now we do think that way. We're like looking at something on Instagram and we're like, oh, I wonder what their real life is like. That's where we immediately go. I was watching back then. I was like, I didn't think about what their lives were like or the people behind the show. I just believed what I saw and really didn't see them as more than those people and really just took it at very face value. And I think that is what it was more like back then, right? Some people will call it a simpler time. Some people, so it sort of just was a very different way that our brains thought about media and about being let in to see other people's lives. It was more of like something really interesting than potentially dangerous, I think.
Yeah.
You've built a good life. From the outside, it looks like you have it all together. You eat clean, you work hard, you take care of everyone. But there's this one area that still feels impossible to master, and that is food. You can eat perfectly all day and still end up in the kitchen at night wondering why you keep doing this. You promise yourself you'll start fresh tomorrow, and I know you mean it every single time. But the cycle, it always finds its way back, especially when you're stressed, when you're overwhelmed, or when you're just tired of being the one that's holding it all together. And I get it because I lived that way for years. And what I learned is this. The problem, it was never about food. It was the pressure underneath it, the perfectionism, the self-doubt, the part of me that never felt safe and secure to just be me. And that's why I created the sober eating sequence. It's a proven 3-phase method that rewires the emotional patterns and the belief systems driving overeating so you can relax, trust yourself around food, and release weight completely naturally, without force and without obsession. Because when your body feels secure, it lets go. The cravings quiet, the self-punishment, it softens, and food, it stops being the thing that you have to fix. This is not another plan. This isn't another rule book. It's a revolutionary transformation for your nervous system, for your body, and for your identity. So join the sober eating movement today.
And I mean, the show, I think, went on for 17 seasons. And, in the first few seasons, I don't really think anyone suspected that there was anything going on. But we do learn in the documentary that there is allegations of drug use. And not only drug use, because there's this added pressure of the money. That if you won Biggest Loser, you won $250,000. And that is huge. Not only do you get to your dream weight, but you get to potentially change your life with this money. So I think when I was watching the documentary and I learned that people were using drugs to get to that place, I don't think I was surprised because there's so much added pressure. And then I think the one thing that surprised me though was that after the allegations came out, the show did address it, and Julia Michaels talks about it on their live taping of a weigh-in. And she says that she was okay with the contestants taking caffeine pills. And you can even see some clips where she's talking to the contestants about, oh, the doctor might tell you this many calories to eat, but here's what I'm going to tell you how many calories to eat. So I thought that was interesting. So let's talk a little bit about what does it do to your nervous system when you override its signals with drugs like caffeine, added pressure. What kind of long-term damage can that lead to?
Again, like I think Jillian and the whole show was very much not realizing the confluence of all of these desires that people have, right? Like wealth, thinness, body image, all this stuff, and making this one huge promise that you're going to get this at the end, not realizing that humans are wired for survival and wired, that we're animals, like, and honestly, it's like the opportunity to get this thing that we want to get. Look, and not everybody did it because ultimately Darwinism, right? Like not everybody is going to take those actions, but there are going to be some people that are, and those people are probably going to win, right? And so the consequence of overriding yourself to take drugs, only certain people that are going to take drugs, right? Not everybody on that show said I took the caffeine pills, but the people that did take the caffeine pills are probably the ones that, and the drugs are the ones that either won the show or got close to winning the show, because in their personality is a certain edge. In their personality, there's a certain part of their personality that's more attracted to do something like that to get a certain result. Now, you could say that that behavior could be redirected towards a healthier type of way to do it. And the truth is what bothers me the most is that I think this show made it seem like that's what they were doing. But I think ultimately it exploited people's personality in certain ways. And it ended up getting them to a place where they abuse themselves and destruct themselves in the name of health. And that is a gaslight, and that is emotionally abusive. So I do think there was, even though it was a physical thing that happened, I do think that there was emotional abuse, and because these people trusted them.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And as they talk about in the documentary, they tried to use Bob and Jillian as psycho pseudotherapists. And they didn't have any therapy on the show. They only had one doctor who he claims he was constantly in battle with Jillian and Bob about the tactics they were using. There was so much emotional abuse, shame, and humiliation, I believe, were probably the two biggest things that stood out for me as a motivation tool. As someone who struggles with their weight, we already feel that every single day from the world, from advertising, dating apps, whatever it is. But I don't think that helped at all. I mean, did it make for good TV? Possibly. But I think the public weigh-ins, I know that was part of the show where they had to get up on the scale and weigh in, but it felt like every person on the documentary talks about if they came in the lowest on that week for losing the least amount of weight, well, then you have the added thing of getting voted off. And I just thought that was crazy. I think they created this culture of suffering and shame and the belief that you can't become thin without literally hating who you are as a overweight person and shaming yourself into not eating certain things. And so I think we should talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple things. So I think that it was a sign of the times. The tough love was sort of a sign of the times, that was sort of how trainers were. As you know, like during that time, I was actually still, when The Biggest Loser came out, I was still struggling with my own eating issues. 2005, I was 24, 25, 2005, 2006. That was like my rock bottom. Those are like my rock bottom years. So yes, I was a dietitian, and, go back and listen to my story. I have an episode on the podcast that's my personal story. It really goes into detail. But I remember at the time I was struggling, And so I was kind of going to personal trainers. There was this masochistic element to watching The Biggest Loser for me that was motivating, kind of. And I think because of the times then, that was, like I said, I think that sort of kick your butt, like kick your ass, tough love. I'm going to yell at you because it's best for you, right? It's sort of that I'm going to hit you because I love you type of parenting, right? Like it's sort of this similar type, to I'm going to get you in line. Like it was a very boomer, 1970s, 80s type of way, actually. And I think back now too, like that it really was that changing of the guard of value system of how we approach health and wellness that really was a tipping point of how we were changing. I remember there were two shows that I was watching at the same time. One was The Biggest Loser and one was called Starting Over, which was with two life coaches. One was a Janla Van Zant, who I'm obsessed with and like would love to meet her if somehow she listens to this. Like that show saved my life, like legit saved my life. Just this is a sidebar, but I went to Southeast Asia on a trip. I talk about this, but when I realized that being a dietitian and it just wasn't where I needed to go, I quit my job. I had like a quarter life crisis at 25 years old, quit my job and went traveling through Southeast Asia with a friend of mine. But that year, like 2005, 2004, 2005, I literally would DVR. So this was like, tell you where we go, like DVR Starting Over. And so I went to Southeast Asia, DVR'd every episode and watched everything when I got back. Like it literally was such a huge part of my healing journey. And so that being said, I was watching The Biggest Loser and I was watching Starting Over, and it was just such a interesting time because people were trying to be compassion and mindfulness, and of course there was tough love with that too, but it was about knowing yourself and being yourself. And The Biggest Loser was kind of like a manipulation that you will find yourself if you abandon yourself in this way. And also, to your point about the shame and humiliation, I do think they kind of ran the show like a casino. Like they ran the show like gambling. That's how I saw the live weigh-ins, right? Like it's like you hate yourself, but like you need to do it because maybe you're going to get a good result. And then you're going to be so happy, but like you're so nervous before. It's basically like playing roulette, right? It's like you can't leave, right? Like you keep doing it. You keep doing it because it's just like, but like you hate yourself 90% of the time, but like or 97% of the time, but you just keep doing it for the 3% because then you're going to feel amazing. And I do think that they capitalized on the addict behavior. And honestly, it wasn't the food part of being the addict. They transferred their addiction with the food. So this is my real takeaway. They transferred their addictive personalities that they had with food, and they transferred it to their process of the show and
Absolutely.
the live weigh-in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the way people lost weight, because these people are working out like 6 to 7 hours a day. They're eating 800 calories. I mean, I can't even imagine. I mean, they're working out like it's their full-time job. And as we know, unless you're a professional athlete, like no one gets paid to work out that many hours a day. I don't even know if that's healthy.
Not even that. Like you need to fuel yourself in a certain way to work out that much. You need to build yourself up to your heart rate getting that high without compromising your metabolism and your physiological health, like your muscle mass and your bone density, and not to mention your emotional state and your nervous system state that ends up being fried, right? Like you end up just completely just screwing up so many things. And yes, are you healthier metabolically when you lose weight if you're that obese? For sure.
Yeah.
But not at the expense of so many other things. It doesn't have to be that fast.
That extreme. Yeah.
Right.
Because they talk about, and I think this was kind of the turning point. It was probably season 10, season 12, somewhere in there, where they did a study that followed like 14 of the biggest losers, and they all gained the weight back. Either
Yeah.
they gained the weight back or they were heavier than when they first did the show at all. And they made claims about how the extreme weight loss may have disrupted their metabolic state. They haven't been proven because it was such a small case study of the 14 people, but it was a controlled study because it was all the people who had been on the show.
Yeah, but I remember there were the guy that won, he ended up gaining all of his weight back. And in the
Yeah.
show, he was talking about the shame about that and
Yeah.
some feelings he had about it. But the biggest takeaway that I took from that was the fact that I do think that he realized that he never healed the underlying reasons why he was overeating and
Yeah.
binging and using food as a drug, essentially, and why he ended up getting there. And that's what I always say. It's like,
Yeah.
in order to lose weight permanently, you need to understand how you got to that weight to begin with. You have to be willing to take the time. And the Biggest Loser never did that, right? They never
That was
took
the
the time
one piece they missed. Yeah.
Right. They only focused on, getting the weight off and like the result and getting the weight off, and now it's just so funny to look at, not funny, but it's so obvious to look at that. And now it's like, of course, you're promising them happiness and fulfillment and confidence because their weight dropped. But, and I say this all the time too, just about everyone can lose weight. It's staying at that weight that's the hardest work. Anyone can follow a plan when they're in the little container of the plan, whether it's the Biggest Loser or a diet or whatever here. It's, have you created the circumstances and the infrastructure in your own being and your own mind, your own body, your own lifestyle to sustain that, right? It's like a house, right? Have you built the house to hold the new home that your body is now providing for you? If you just have the home, that's your body, obviously that's important, but it needs to have a house to live in, and you need to build that house. And that takes time. And everyone's house is different. You can't follow someone else's, plan. And there's no shortcut to that. There's no quick fix to that. The shortcut is having a really good system to follow, right? Which, obviously I believe my sober eating method program is, and the sober eating sequence and, working with me and things like that. But, you need to build that, because we saw it so time and time again with the Biggest Loser documentary that they got to the result, right? They did have the confidence for a little bit amount of time, but then they didn't create the house for that new self to live in, and it all fell apart. That's a problem, because it's not just about the results, it's about sustaining it.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And it goes hand in hand with like the shame that it feels like to be in a larger body. And I don't think that even if you lose the weight, and even Bob Harper says this in the documentary, you never get that monkey off your back. Like there's something about being larger and it being that you are invisible and you're also hyper seen at the same time. It's very confusing. It's such a paradox because we're overlooked because we're not thin and beautiful, but people feel that they have a right to make comments on larger people's bodies, make fun at their expense. And I don't know that we're really truly out of that as a culture. That was my biggest takeaway for me, because I think you can lose, like you said, it's easy to lose the weight, but it's harder to keep it off, because if you don't build those support systems around you, those pillars, the minute all of these people left the show and they went home to their normal lives, they went back to their closet eating. They were thinner, but they didn't heal those deep wounds that caused them to use food in that way in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm curious, why do you think that, with what you said about being seen and invisible, why do you think that they ended up gaining the weight back?
Yeah, I think for me, I saw like, because they show in the documentary the tapes of them in the beginning, and because they have to make these ridiculous tapes to
Yeah.
get on the show, and they're talking about their addiction. They're talking about their food addiction. They're talking about secret eating. They're talking about hiding it from their friends and family. They're talking about the shame that they feel and how guilty they feel for being overweight, how they just feel like ugly, unlovable. Like, it's honestly, it's so heartbreaking.
So if they felt that way, I'm just
Yeah.
curious, why do you think that that wasn't enough for them to stay thin?
Yeah. It's funny because they were basically asked that question at the very end of the documentary by the producers, and they're sort of answering it, but they all say, I felt like it was the shame. Like they
Oh,
they
I
didn't
agree.
heal those wounds at first, and then they started to gain the weight back, and then it just got like out of control. And they even say like, they felt so much shame because they wanted to keep it off, but then by the time the weight started to come back, and they didn't know how to restrict themselves because they had been restricting so much when they were on the show, they went just right back to binging again,
Yeah,
and they didn't learn how to deal with food binging.
right. So that's definitely like what was happening.
Yeah.
But I think, and like, of course, they felt shame. And I think that what they realized was that they felt more like themselves obese than they did thin. That's my take on it.
Yeah.
That it was so, whether it's conscious or not, right? And that's why I always talk about abandoning yourself as being one of the worst things you could ever do. That is abandoning yourself. I'm not even talking about abandoning yourself binging. I'm talking about
Yeah.
abandoning yourself in the sense where you're not even admitting what you want. That's why I always talk about like, don't abandon yourself by saying you don't want to lose weight. Say it, right?
Yeah.
Own it. Own what you want to do, right? And then in a healthy way, in a self-respecting, self-loving, self-valuing way, with from a place of self-worth, go and make that happen for yourself, right?
Yeah.
They didn't do that. But I think they thought they were, which is why I blame
Yeah.
the show, because I think that they knew it was a show probably, but I think that they were putting their trust, which is why I think the show was very abusive. But, they were putting their trust, and they were adults. So they signed off on fine print they
Yeah.
probably didn't read. So of course, whatever it is.
And
And
they
they were
were
like,
pressured. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm going to be in a show. And of course, all these things. But ultimately, I think the motivation was from a place of trust and thought they were going to be held, and it was going to be a supportive place, because why not? Like I said, we were in a different time where we weren't as skeptical and as thinking so much and asking a billion questions, just never thinking anyone's telling the truth. Like that just wasn't the way it was back then. So, but I think that ironically, gaining the weight back was reclaiming their power.
That's so interesting.
And also, they feel shame and all that other stuff. Of course, being obese, but I do think, and I think the guy who won, who ended up gaining all his weight back,
Yeah.
sort of had that about him. Like he sort of was like, I know I'm obese again,
Yeah.
but I'm myself. That's the part that's interesting to me, is that they still didn't get to the result, which I think is the real result, which is where you can be thinner and also be happy and also be like fulfilled and also not feel like it's an either or, right? Like
Yeah.
if I'm thin, I need to be miserable. Like you
Right.
can be thin, or if I'm thin, I'm totally abusing myself and I'm self-destructing and like all these things. And I think that they all gained the weight back because it was some subconscious reclaiming of their power, even though I believe that they know that being obese means that they're going to feel shame, they're going to feel judged, they're going to feel seen and invisible at the same time. But if you weighed the two evils, they picked that evil.
Yeah. It's like better to be with the devil you know than the devil you don't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's such a really interesting take. And I'm really glad we got to talk this through today. And I think there's so many resources that people can look through to find more about how this could have been solved, using some of the methods that are available for people today. So, is there any other episodes that you would recommend for people to listen to if they found this one really interesting?
Totally. Like I mean, I think so much of the long form podcast episodes that you could watch on YouTube, subscribe, of course, and you can listen to on Spotify and Apple are great. But the two I'm going to call out, one is called The Psychology of Restriction, Why We Fear Taking Up Space. I think it just speaks so much to all of what we were talking about today, sort of like taking up space physically, taking up space emotionally. So it really talks about both sides of that. And then I think another one that's really interesting, because I do think that a lot of people that struggle with binge eating and, binge eating that leads to obesity are people that are secret eaters. And I think there's something to say about when we think about secret eating, we think about secret eating by ourselves alone in our house, and it's sort of the shameful thing. But I think there's a way that you could reframe it where eating by yourself can be super nourishing and really empowering and can really make you feel more agency about yourself. And I think that was an arc for me for sure, because I was a, binge eater, binging and purging episodes. I was like in my house, like, secretly a lot. And then to get to the place now where I very often have taken myself out to a restaurant and eat by myself or make myself a super nice dinner. So that episode is called How to Turn Solo Eating from a Shameful Secret into Self-Love. And I just think that if you're someone who loves food and you love eating, and right now that feels really conflicting for you and is a struggle for you, I really want you to go to that episode so you can hear how I talk about moving from that experience with eating to a really nourishing and self-loving experience with eating by myself. So, which I love to do.
I'm for sure going to go listen to that episode. I'm so excited. I think we all could use a little bit more care and love we show ourselves when we're alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Brittny, this was amazing. Thank you so much for suggesting that we do this. I really hope that everyone listening enjoyed this. If you have any questions or comments about the episode, you can leave us comments on YouTube. You can leave us comments on Spotify. You can also leave us a voice note on SpeakPipe, which we have in our show notes. Yes?
Yes. Yeah. You can leave us a voice note. And I think we're heading towards maybe doing a Q&A episode. So if you send in a question, we will answer it on air. So if you send those in on SpeakPipe, that link will be in the show notes. We will answer your questions live so you can hear them.
Yes, amazing. And it'll all be anonymous. So if you want them, and I think they're anonymous on SpeakPipe too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So they'll all be anonymous. And of course, we do a monthly giveaway. So if you are interested in a one-on-one coaching session with me, all you need to do is go to Apple and leave a rating and a review and take a screenshot of your written review that you leave on Apple. You could email it to podcast@bewellbyak.com, or you can send it on Instagram at bewellbyak. You could just DM us there. We will accept that as an entry, and I would love to meet you and do our one-on-one sessions. That'll be so great. And if you haven't yet subscribed on Spotify and Apple, please do. And of course, subscribe on YouTube as well. And thank you so much. I am Alana, and Brittny is with us today. Can't wait to have her again. And I will see you next time on the next episode of Emotional Eating Unwrapped.